We're going to take a quick look at VKCloud, and we're going to take a look at it from the point of view of the GE tenant. So VKC allows all of the channel partners around the world to all be inside of the same Oracle database. But every channel partner is obviously different, and the way that we manage that is by having what's called tenants. Every channel partner becomes a tenant inside of VKC, and in this case I'm going to be logging in as the GE tenant, which has a little bit of extra power in that it lets us manipulate tenants and look at data at the tenant level. Right now I'm already set up to log in, so IDs and passwords are assigned by the VK administrator, whether it's at the tenant or channel partner level or whether it's for the GE tenant. This would be assigned by a GE administrator. IDs and passwords are managed by the channel partners administrator, not by anybody at GE. I'm logging in as an administrator role user into the GE tenant so that I can take a look at some of the tenant commands that are available. I've logged in now and I'm being presented with the main home screen, which is actually the layout of all the valves and all of the customers inside of the VK tenant. Across the top here I've got a menu, and I think I'm just going to start by jumping into the tenant command, and we'll take a quick look at the kind of information that is stored by tenant and what we at GE can do at a tenant level. Here inside of the tenant form, you see I have a list of all of my tenants that I have, or all my channel partners that I have inside of VKC. A code is given as a quick way for people to log into any given tenant. We have the company name, and we have various columns that I have selected to see. If we want to take a look at all of the information that we're tracking of each tenant, what I'm going to do is I'm opened up the details form, and I now can go in and we can take a look at all of the channel partner level data that we're tracking. We have the date that the original maintenance and license were granted. We have the region that it's in. We have the ability to take a look at tenants, grouping them by country or by region, such as Asia or Europe. We can group them by country as well. We can take a look at whether they're GTCs and marks, and we can control what equipment type they have the ability to use inside of VKC. The reason why it's important to be able to see all of the tenants at one time is we'd like to be able to find out valve counts and the number of times some customers have logged in, or the number of times that the tenant itself, the channel partner themselves, have logged in. Here you see the columns that I have set up include the number of administrative logins, the number of customers that we have as users on each tenant level, and the number of control valves events. If I come into the columns that are available in the grid, I have the ability now to select the relief device valves, relief device events, and there is a difference. If you think of the life of a valve, the valve exists once inside the system, but it may have 3 or 5 or more events that have happened to it. So we can take a look at the number of relief valve accounts and the number of control valve counts. And this becomes really important when we use the filtering mechanism inside of VK as well. If we wanted to, for example, see the number of new Mason-Elin sales that included an SVI, we would just apply a filter for that inside of our standard VK commands. We'd come to this tenant page, and on the tenant page we would ask it to filter the valve counts. And now when we take a look, or when we would see the results here in the number of CV events or the number of CV valves column, these numbers would reflect whatever filter it was that we wanted to have applied. Fundamentally, that's the way that the tenants or the channel partners inside of VKC work, and this is the level of analysis that we can do at the GE level of all of the channel partners' data that's inside the system. Going forward into the future, there's going to be more analytics available. Currently, this is all that we have, however. Now we're going to take a look at VKC in terms of just a regular channel partner user. As we logged in before, you remember that we were at the valve tree page, and the valve tree page is a great place for us to get an understanding of how data is structured inside of VK. Here in the valve tree, you see we have a list of what's in VK's terms owners. And owners are the customer. So if you think of an owner as Shell, so that'd be the owner of the valve. So the owner of the valve is Shell, that's the customer. And every owner is made up of a number of physical plant locations. We have Shell, then we have a plant at Antwerp, a plant in Singapore, a plant in Texas, a plant in Louisiana, etc. Shell is the customer or owner in VK's terms, and these would be all the physical plants inside of VK's terminology as well. If I open back up training, the owner of training, you see we have these different plants. And down here at the bottom, I've got Silsby opened up, and I'm going to close it, and we're going to take a look at the plant of Livingston. Now I'm inside of the owner of training, plant of Livingston, and these are all of the valves that are inside of that plant. This includes control valves, relief valves, electric actuators, everything. I can turn on an equipment level, and now what I'll see is a redisplayed tree that's going to include the counts at a equipment level. Relief valves, there's 158, etc. That equipment level just allows me to break down the equipment, the list of equipment, the list of the instrument index by the kinds of valves that it is. This is a very standard instrument index that all the maintenance engineers, all process people inside of a plant would be very familiar in seeing. Taking a little bit closer look at this now, here we see we have the valve PS Demo 1. If I open up PSV Demo 1, I've got 4 events to it, 2004, 5, 7, and 10, which were also displayed here in the lifeline at the valve level. The idea behind the structure of the data in VK is that there's owners, plants, valves, and then valves are made up of all these different events. If I open up any given event, you'll see that there's parts, images, and attachments associated with that event. Here I have attachments and images associated with the valve itself. These may be something like a factory signature or a as-shipped or as-built image of some complicated tubing for accessories that are on the control valve. We can have images and attachments attached to the valve, and we can have images, attachments, and parts attached to any given event. If I wanted to take a look at the exact details of any given event, I'll just double click on it, and what it'll do is it will open up what's called the details form inside of VK. All valve events have one of these details forms associated with them. These detail forms are laid out in the approximate workflow process that occurs inside of the shop at the channel partner at a GE site. So we have the order info tab, we have a general tab, and here you see we have as received and we have as shipped information. So obviously we're tracking how the valve comes into the shop and how the valve ships. We have configuration details, and this is a relief valve, so we have information like model number, orifice designation, orifice area, etc. We have name, place, and process, as received, pre-test information. And on the pre-test tab, you'll notice that we have the pre-test pressures here, and VK does some calculations of the pre-test versus the cold differential set pressure, which would be shown here. These numbers are very important to process facilities and places that want to have their valves, their relief valves, pre-tested before they're repaired, because the pre-test will allow them to determine whether the valve would have theoretically worked properly in the field or not. These tabs, anyways, they go across, and they're the approximate workflow order inside of the shop. And all of the data is collected at the shop level, and it can be collected over the repair of the valve while it is occurring. So that's the details form, and every repair event inside of VK have a details. As we saw in this tree, we've got parts, images, and attachments associated with each repair event. So if I open up the parts and I go ahead and I'll double click on a part, and it'll bring us to our parts form. The parts details are actually pretty straightforward. We have the part name, we have the part number, we have the condition that it was received in, and importantly, we've got 2 pieces of information. We've got the work performed and the recommendation. So the data that's typed in here allows us to do analytics based upon all of the parts for any given number of valves. If you imagine that we have a turnaround with 75 valves in the turnaround, we may want to see all of the parts that were replaced for all of the valves that were in the turnaround. We have the ability to do that as long as the work performed is being properly captured as part replaced. Recommendation is what we recommend for the next event to the valve. Imagine all the valves that came in this year. If we had a bunch of parts for some of the valves that were going to be replaced or needed to be replaced the next time the valve was in for maintenance, we'd have a recommendation of replace next repair. And now we can do planning for upcoming turnarounds. We can take a look at all the valves coming due in the next 6 months, and we can see all the parts that are either recommended spares or suggested for replacement during the upcoming repair. These fields allow us to do analytics, they allow us to grow our business, they allow our channel partners to go to their customer and tell their customers, you're going to need to pre-order these parts because they have a long lead time in ordering or something of this nature. That is the parts detail about this given event. If I open up the images, we'll go ahead and we'll take a look at the images. As they say, a picture's worth 1,000 words, and obviously the more pictures that are taken, the more confident and comfortable the owner of the valve, the customer of the channel partner, is going to be in what it is that happened during the repair. Many places actually use the images to keep track of a photo of the original packaging from the part. And this is done for part verification and for part traceability to prove that the part actually came from an OEM manufacturer versus some gray market part. Here along the bottom you see we have a thumbnail of all of the images, and you'll notice that we have here an as shipped picture and an as received picture. One of the unique powers of VKC, and one thing that is always demoed by our channel partners because it's really quite an impressive and powerful tool, is the ability to compare images. So you notice that we have on the left hand side we have an image, and I'm going to select an image on the left hand side, so I'll select an incoming image, and on the right hand side I'm going to select a corresponding view of the as shipped of the valve. Now we can see the incoming and we can see the outgoing. That's kind of neat, and what we're doing right now is comparing it all for this one specific event. So we're comparing it for the most recent event to the most recent event. If I wanted to take a look at parts from past repairs and compare them to this repair, maybe I'm looking for repetitive damage of a constantly being replaced part, I can go ahead and I can pick previous events to this valve and I can select images from it. So again, if I was noticing that there was constant damage to one specific part and it was being replaced over and over, I could take a look at it through the past life of the valve, past repairs of the valve, and we could see if there was any sort of misapplication. That's the images that are tracked inside of VKC. And now we're going and we'll take a look at the attachments. And now an attachment you can think of as any file that is not an image. If it's a PDF, if it's a DWG from AutoCAD, if it's a video, maybe there was a need to have an external inspector monitor the test, and instead of having them physically present, the channel partner just recorded a video of it. They have the ability to upload any file that they want and attach it to the repair event that has occurred. Whether it's a PDF, whether it's an invoice, whether in this case it's an EVT, all of these files can be uploaded. They're well defined and everybody knows what they're about, and you can download them and view them at any time. Those attachments can be password protected, so end users, customers, owners of the valves may or may not have access to them. That's the general breakdown of the data inside of VKC. Again, we have an owner, which is the customer. We have a plant, which is the physical location. And then inside of each plant, which is where we add the valves, we have to add a valve to a plant, we have all of the valves. The valves then are made up of a life of the valve, and we have here 4 events for 2005, 7, and 10. And the 10 is the most recent, or the way that the valve currently is in service, or if the valve is in the shop right now for repair or for testing or inspection, there would be a most recent created, and that would be the way the valve is right now in the shop. 3 historicals, 1 most recent event. That's the general landing page called the valve tree. There's some other functionality over here. We have the ability to look at to-do lists and do some turnaround management. We can manipulate what's being displayed inside the tree. I can take a look at the tree. For example, I can add a level in the tree of next maintenance date year. And what this is now going to allow us to do is it's going to allow us to take a look at all of the valves that we have inside any given location. And here we see the year that the next maintenance is due. So we could sit down with a customer and we could say, hey, Mr. Customer, in 2015, here's a list of all the valves that were due for maintenance. What happened to them? Why weren't they in for maintenance? Or we could do turnaround planning for upcoming now in 2017. And we can take a look and say all these valves are, again, here we see the valve list, and alarm clock means it's past due, and a standard icon from a PNID of relief valve means it's coming due for maintenance. So we can go through 2017 with our customer and we can explain to them the valves that are coming due, the valves that are past due, and we can actually derive business from going through and reviewing the data like that with the owners of the valves. If I go ahead and I take a look at the next most common, or probably the most common landing page, working page inside of VKC, it would be the repair list. So I've jumped into the repair list, and again we're taking a look at a standard grid inside of VK. So all of these columns are selected by me. I choose their width, I choose their order, I choose the data that it is, I choose everything about it. Across the bottom you see we have the number of pages that are available, and we have the number of items that are in the grid, and I can jump from page 1 to page 11 or anywhere in between. We can also set the number of records that we have per page. Across the top I have the different equipment types that we can view. Right now I'm in relief valves. I can switch over to control valves and I'll be viewing control valves. all of the equipment types in VK are individually selected because a control valve obviously has very different data points than a relief valve, which has very different data points than an electric actuator like a rotorque or a limit torque actuator. And then the fourth equipment type inside of VK is the line valves or manual valves. These allow me to switch between all of the different equipment types, and then following out to the right we have buttons that allow us to see either the lifeline of the valve. Clicking on the lifeline of the valve opens up the lifeline page, and inside the lifeline page I'm seeing a really nice snapshot of the valve in really easy to digest format. Here's the 04, 05, 07, and 2010 events. There's the maintenance and the next test date. So they're actually past due. It's 2011, and of course today is 2017. So this is a nice lifeline of the valve's entire history. That was the lifeline. Parts we already looked at. Images we've looked at, and generic attachments we looked at as well. These make up the fundamental aspects of the repair event or the test event that has happened. There's also action marks, welds, and some other items that we track additionally. In the grid, we have the ability to open up the details form, and we can of course do editing, and we can delete it. So we have the ability to dive into the repair event itself here. Down the left-hand side, we have the ability to toggle between most recent and all repairs. And remember how we described the life of a valve being a most recent event, and then everything else would be a past or historical event to it. A valve may have 4 repairs to it, a valve may have just 1 repair to it, and that allows us to toggle between them. We have the ability obviously to add, and we can add data to VKC. We can generate reports. All channel partners have their own reports. Reports are completely customized and built by them, whether it's a foreign language issue, whether they need to have some sort of unique report generated. Whatever it is that the channel partner wants, the channel partner can build inside of the reports. In here you see we have test reports, we have travelers, and we have for new and repairs. We have a certificate of conformances for newly assembled valves. We have all kinds of reports that are available, including having embedded images inside of the reports. Reports are infinite, and they're completely customized by the channel partner. We have the obvious commands, find and filter. We can export the data. If a channel partner is got a customer that is using SAP or using Maximo or something of this nature, they can export the data. There's always an email button present, and what the email button allows you to do is it allows a customer to very quickly send an email to a contact at the channel partner because they might have a question about a part or about a valve. And then we have the analytic functionality down here. We have the ability to limit the grid to seeing only the valves that have something. So maybe you want to see all of the valves that have a part that needs to be pre-ordered. Maybe you want to see all the valves that have a part that was replaced. All these allow you to do quick analytics in front of the customer or with a salesperson and just see what the pulse of the valves in the customer and inside the shop are. Valve calendars are very nice, very unique features that very graphically, visually let you see a calendar with a list of counts of all the valves that are coming due or past due. Another great tool to allow you to derive business from customers by sitting down in front of them and going through their valve population with them. Analysis button brings us into some general analysis commands. We can obviously do counts and sums of things like valve population, coming due, past due, repairs performed, mean time between failure, on time delivery. And we also have the ability to create columns that are analytics. We can create a pressure analysis column or a date column that will do math between dates or do math between different pressures. For example, you see in our grid right now we have pre-test leakage percent of cold def. And what this is telling us is the percent at which the pre-test was leaking versus the cold def. And arguably I don't want that column, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to come into the columns command, and we're going to take a quick look at how we can go ahead and we can change columns up. So I'm going to remove that one from the list of columns, and I'm going to take a look and I'm going to add the pretest percent of cold def. So I found it and I'm adding it. And I will go ahead and I'll just bump it up one little bit, and let's take a look at some of the other columns that we have available, because a lot of these columns are actually analytics in themselves. Here, for example, we have the number of months past due, we have the number of months since tested, we have the number of months till due. So let's go ahead and let's add the number of months since tested, And we also have the ability to calculate the number of months gap between the previous nameplate they tested, number of parts. So we have a bunch of built-in columns that are basically essentially analytics. These column setups can be saved, and they can also be shared. So a admin or a salesperson at the channel partner can build a grid column setup that would be something that their customer may have asked for, but the customer didn't know the software well enough to be able to do it themselves. Taking a look at the columns that I've added now, what you can see is we have the pretest as a percent of cold diff. So this means that the valve pre-tested at 100% of the cold diff, which is pretty much exactly what the customer would like to see. If something pre-tests way outside of its range, it's going to end up showing these asterisks to the right of it. And this is actually a defined range by the person that is looking at the grid. So this can be any percentage at all. It doesn't have to be 5%. It varies depending upon code, essentially. And then, of course, this last one here that we had just added, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to shrink down some of these columns a little bit. Try and make it so it fits a little bit smoother on our list. What we're seeing here is we're seeing the number of months since tested. And just this column alone, imagine sitting in front of your customer, imagine sitting in front of the customer with this number. We can go through and we can take a look at all of their valves, and we can say how many months has it been since it was last tested. And here we know that. We know that it's been 75 months since it's been last tested, and that actually verifies this. Into these asterisk and tilde here indicate that it's in violation of the currently set maintenance interval and the currently set test interval. The grid is again defined completely by you, and once it's defined, you can actually go in and you can generate a grid report. We can set up the grid with all the columns we want, with all of the valves we want, whether it's something with an SVI, something on high pressure steam, whatever it is that we want to define the grid as, and then we can go ahead and we can dump out a grid report, which gives us a really nice way to do a spreadsheet output, if you will, of what it is that we've got set up in our grid. Taking a look at all this data, it'd be really nice if we could have this data automatically emailed to us. And fortunately we can. Over here, when I click on my ID that I logged in under, you see I have a user preferences option. And inside that user preferences, I can come over here to my schedule command. And in my schedule command, I can have VK automatically email me valves on any interval that I want. Right now, I've got it set up to email every morning at 6 a.m. So every morning at 6 a.m. every day, it's going to email me the data from the currently set working owner and plant, and it's going to email me all of the valves that are less than 100% complete but greater than 0. So during the process of repair, valves get a repair percent complete calculated for them. The calculation is done by how the channel partner has structured it. So if they want to have date received, received by, received condition, shipped by, they can create any formula that they want to calculate the repair percent complete as it goes through their shop. This allows me to have VKC automatically email me so I can take a look at all the valves that are on the shop floor and see what their status is every morning. I'm telling it that I want to see all of my relief valves, control valves, line valves, and actuators, and what I want to have sent to me is all of them. I don't want to have any filter applied, and I want to have whatever columns, whatever grid columns I currently have set up emailed to me. This scheduling thing basically allows a customer to have valves automatically emailed to them, or a salesperson at the channel partner to have valves automatically emailed to them, whether they're the valves coming due in the next 3 months, whether they're the valves that are currently in the shop, whatever the situation may be that they want to have the data coming to them for. I'll jump back over to our repair list and we'll take a look at a couple more items and we'll wrap up the demo. So on the repair list here inside the grid, obviously I have the ability to really quickly find. So in the column header, I can just type in a number here for serial number, and it's going to show me all the serial numbers that have that in it. So I'll drop that back to 91, and now I'll see the 7 valves that have a 91 in their serial number. Very, very easy to find valves and locate a specific valve in question. One of the other really neat commands we have is the ability to do group by. So if I turn on this group by bar, click that interesting little icon, you see now I have an area here where it says drag a column up to it and we can group by it. So I'll drag manufacturer up, and now what we're seeing is we're seeing our grid grouped by manufacturer. I have 60 consolidated valves, I have 3 Crosby valves, I have 5 Ferris valves, I have 32 AG valves. I can drag up as many columns as I want, including date columns. And in this case, I took the date tested column and I drug it up to it as well. And you'll see that it's grouping it by year. So if I come down to my manufacturer, I've consolidated and open it up, you'll see my consolidated valves now group by the year that it was tested, 2016, 15, 14, 13, and 2010. A really, really neat way to view your data and a really cool way to get to view into your data without having to go in any of the analytic commands inside of VK. I've clicked the group by bar to shut it off again. And across the top, we're just going to briefly touch on the other functionality inside of VKC, and then we're going to wrap the demo up. We took a look at the valve tree, which is a instrument index view of the valves. The repair list is the fundamental home base where all of the day in and day out functionality basically occurs. Locations allow us to track spare valves. You can build a location inside of the plant, and then you can build a list of all of the valves that are functionally capable of working in that location. You can connect any equipment through its P&ID loop. We have a turnaround manager. You have the ability to add some notes to anything that you want, and then in the tools command we can import, we can export, we can do some data manipulation commands. We have the ability to create an infinite number of user roles and set up permissions to any single role that we want. This allows us to completely fine-tune who has access to what functionality inside of VK. We can obviously manage all the users that are inside of VK. And these commands here, this template and this internals, allows each channel partner to customize the details forms or the data points that are being collected for each of their different valve types. One channel partner might have a need to track an SAP asset ID number, another channel partner may not. That's how we handle those differences, is by letting the channel partners build their own configuration for how VK is collecting data or what points VK is collecting data on. And again, as we talked about before, obviously reports are all configured uniquely per channel partner or per tenant as well. When person is done working, as we've now approached the end of our demo, we come back over to our user ID, we click the logout button, and we're given our logout screen, and that will wrap up the brief look at VKC through the GE tenant through a GE administrator's eyes. Thank you and goodbye.